episode of the Flying Upstream podcast, the podcast that boldly challenges the norm and explores the unconventional paths of our guests. We are your hosts. I'm Louisa, and this is the beautiful Kristen. Today, we have a truly inspiring episode lined up for you. We'll be diving deep into the journey of our incredible guest, Bradley Shepard. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, yeah.
Perfect, perfect. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's get ready to be inspired as we welcome Bradley to the Flying Upstream podcast. Bradley, welcome to our podcast. Why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. I am Bradley Shepard. I'm a doctor of chiropractic and certified functional medicine practitioner in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And I've been a chiropractor for the last 16 years. And a few years ago, I discovered functional medicine, which I found was a much more powerful tool to help my patients and my clients. And I want to take this message online,
Amazing.
and I want to
We're
help
super
as
excited to hear
many.
more about this. Bradley, I'm wondering if you can share with us.
Was that a
Zero
glitch?
delay.
Sorry, I think you cut off for a second.
Oh, dear.
Wondering if you can share with us a little bit about your journey that led you here. And you mentioned you've kind of found something new in your life. And what was that like, that whole experience for you?
So I was a chiropractor for 16 years. Well, I have been a chiropractor, and a few years ago, I discovered functional medicine. The one thing that attracted me to chiropractic was they touted the idea of getting to the underlying cause of problems. And with chiropractic, it seems like all of the underlying problems tended to go back towards the spine and the nervous system, according to the chiropractic philosophy. And there is certainly some truth to that, but I think there's so much more. And I was just, for so long, I was able to help a lot of people, but I wasn't able to help all of the people that I thought I could or thought I should, because something was missing, and that something turned out to be the functional medicine aspect. And the functional medicine aspect is the idea of, let's find the underlying cause of what's going on instead of just treating the symptoms. That's one thing that led me to chiropractic, is let's get to the underlying cause. And to me, the underlying, a good solution to a headache isn't necessarily to take an aspirin. I don't think that you have a headache because you don't have enough aspirin in your body, right? Sure, it can help it can offer some temporary relief, but what if we could actually get to the root cause of the problem? Sometimes it happens to be, things that are going on in the neck or your stress that can cause those headaches. And then we can ask the question, okay, what's causing the stress? And we can go all the way back to what's really the underlying cause. And functional medicine is what really does that. And I've actually focused more on the nutrition and how to balance hormones aspect of functional medicine. And that's kind of what I've really honed on, because to me, that's what's really interesting. And I've been able to see some incredible results with this.
I love this because we are all about the unconventional, and that is an unconventional way to look at medicine, because I think our medical, I don't know if I would call it that, our health system that's supposed to be there to guide us, as one of the things that you mentioned that I see a lot too is, you have a headache, here's an aspirin, but we're covering, like you said, what we're doing, what it feels like for me is masking the real problem. And so I love what you're doing, but I have to ask, right? Because even with chiropractic care, never mind functional medicine, what do you get, like, in terms of pushback? Like, what negative, and I hate to start with the negative, but what are the sort of blocks that people put up to this kind of medicine and this kind of care that is so effective? We know, because historically, going back in ages, we've been using this kind of care.
I think the biggest obstacle is the lack of research. I mean, if you go with the conventional medicine route, there's all of these clinical trials and all of this research and you know the double blind studies and all of this stuff that goes on for a pill. which is fine and good because we want to make sure that that pill works. There's not enough research with all of this other stuff with the chiropractic. I mean, I've seen a few great studies out there, but they're relatively small, the 300, 400, maybe 500 people, not these thousands of people like they can get with the clinical trials for the medications and the pharmaceuticals. They have a huge budget for marketing as well. And most chiropractors or most of us in the holistic field, we don't have that kind of financial backing to actually you know put our message out as well. And that's why we're doing podcasts and things like this, because we want to get the message out. It's really important. And we don't have the funding to do these huge research studies either. So I think that's the biggest obstacle that we're facing.
Thank you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think functional medicine.
Oh no, hold on for a second.
Oh, there seems to be a little bit of a delay.
Okay.
There's a delay.
Okay. So my question is, and tell me if I'm wrong here, that functional medicine usually emphasizes a more personalized treatment plan, and that can be kind of costly. I'm wondering if you think this approach creates disparity in access to this kind of healthcare.
It can, because a lot of insurance companies that will cover a lot of the medical treatments won't cover the functional medicine. They deem it more of an experimental, or, and it can be costly. I've seen a lot of functional medicine practitioners that are, $4,000 just for the initial testing, and that can be a really big hurdle. I try to keep my costs as low as possible, of course. So, I try to look for the labs that are offering the practitioner discounts, and I can pass that discount on to my clients, so we spend a lot less than the $4,000, so, but that can definitely be an obstacle. But I find that the people that go through the program, any functional medicine program will typically, and I can't say this for everybody, but they'll typically spend less on medications. They'll spend less on what we call health care, which could be termed sick care or reactive care rather than preventative care. And that's kind of where the chiropractors tend to fit one foot in one side and one foot on the other side. So we're kind of a blend between the two. But those are some problems, and they're worth talking about.
I love that, because one of the points that you mentioned is something that has been true in my own experience, is that yes, the initial cost, maybe the beginning of functional care is more at the upfront, especially because insurance companies are not necessarily paying for these costs. But I think that, as you mentioned, in the end and in the long run, overall care is actually cheaper, because we're not running to the doctors when something is happening necessarily. We have a better picture of our health because we understood the root cause of what got us to you, in this case, in the first place. And it kind of helped us understand the next time that something comes up, that we need to look at it from the root. And I think that when we treat things from the root, much like energy, right? I'm an energy healer. It's like when we treat it from the root, then we gain such a much deeper understanding of ourselves along the way, along the journey, that it kind of just, we begin to embody that and looking at our health in that way from the root. And I think that saves us a lot of headaches, pun intended here, down the road. But some people really believe that functional medicine practitioners can overemphasize dietary changes at the expense of necessary medical treatments. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that there's a place for both conventional medications and diet. And I think that, an integrative approach is much better than just let's try one or try the other. And I noticed that with chiropractic and physical therapy a lot. I noticed that those that do both together get better results than either one by itself. And I think this is the same way. I think that there's definitely a place for medication. For example, if you have high blood pressure that might be causing your headaches, yeah, let's get that blood pressure down. Let's get with your primary care doctor, get that blood pressure down, because the alternative is worse, right? And then while we're working on getting to the root cause. So I think that there could be a little place of both, and I think that if the conventional doctors and the more natural and holistic doctors work more together, I think we can do a lot better for our patients and our clients.
I love that approach. You're saying it's. I love that you're not just saying this is the way, the only way to move forward. You're saying let's all work together. Everybody has different areas of expertise, different perspectives. Let's bring it all together and find the best solution for the patient.
Yes.
Love that. I'm curious too, because it seems like functional medicine and holistic medicine is starting to grow and become a lot more commercialized. Do you think that this could undermine the integrity of the practice?
I unfortunately, and this is true in any profession, you're going to have the bad eggs, and you're going to find the people that are going to want to take advantage of others. So that's always a risk. You know, the bigger a profession grows, yeah, that's always a risk. And so, yeah, I would always caution anyone that's looking to this to get to know the practitioners and make sure that they're not selling snake oil. Make sure that I try to use a research-backed view as well. I want to know the research. I want to know what's the most recent stuff that's coming out, whether it has to do with gut health. And there's a lot of stuff that's tying gut health to a lot of autoimmunity and things like that. So let's go back to the research. Let's work together, and let's make sure that our practices are evidence-based, because that's going to eliminate a lot of that, snake oil that's out there.
I have a great question. As you're saying that, because I think well, I have a lot of questions, but I kind of want to be able to understand, one, what you think we can do, for example, medical schools, to encourage incoming students to write more, to do more research on functional medicine, on the nutritional aspects, on the hormone aspects of our overall health, and how functional medicine can play a part in that. Because I'll tell you, I have a 17-year-old son who's looking now into he wants to be a PA, a physician's assistant, and as we're looking into these programs, I have not, and I've been looking at colleges for like so many months at this point. I feel like I know all the programs, but I have not come across like any incentive or any program that incentivizes him going into, functional medicine, learning about it, or even writing about it. What can we do, like, as a society, as parents of seniors in high school, as the aunts and uncles, the doctors themselves, to kind of encourage our young people to look into this and give us the research that's going to allow it to be more in the forefront and be more used, so that insurance companies can start paying for this kind of care as well?
That's a great question, and unfortunately, I think as so many things in life, comes down to where your money is going, and you
Mm.
put your money where your mouth is, right? And so if we are, as consumers, shifting more towards, and we're seeing this in the organic superstores. 10 years ago, nothing was organic, and now we're seeing more and more and more organic, because we are demanding that, and we're purchasing those items. And I think that might be the same way. Once we start, trying to find these insurance companies that might offer some of this more preventative care, and there are some insurance policies that do offer wellness. They'll reimburse for gym memberships and things like this, things that are actually helpful for us. And I think if we try to find those policies and purchase those policies more and more and more as consumers, I think that might help the shift. Because unfortunately, money's always the bottom line.
Yeah. No. Thank
You know,
you.
as yeah, as we're talking, I want to switch directions for a minute here. one of the appeals about the way our healthcare system is today is that it is pretty easy to go to the doctor, they give you some kind of prescription, you take it, in a day or two, you're better, right? And there is a huge appeal to that. Or even in 20 minutes, right? I have a headache, in 20 minutes, gone. Like, that's awesome. That's why it's been so successful. We like that instant gratification, especially when it comes to pain and things we don't want to feel. So how do you balance that? How do you tell people, like, no, actually, what's really going to help you in the long run is a lifestyle change, not relying on the instant um, feeling better in whatever way that is, and kind of saying, hey, pharmaceuticals, you have a place, but stop intervening where you don't need to. How do you balance that? And especially when you're talking about different groups working together, but how do you communicate that to your everyday person?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And with my clients, I always say, tell your doctor what you're doing here with me, okay, and vice versa. Even there has to be at least some sort of a link. I think that if we take that approach and say, hey, to the other doctors, we're trying this, and look, it's working. Hopefully, that it'll catch on with the other doctors. Now, I've met some fantastic doctors that are really all aboard with this, and we're seeing more and more of the newer doctors that are kind of more open to this, lifestyle, if you will. And so I think that, again, if we keep those lines of communications open, I think that's the most important thing.
I love that. I do think it is important because one of the things that you mentioned earlier on, which I think is the key, is that you're not saying, "Hey, this is the way." You're saying we need to combine the conventional and this functional medicine, this holistic way of treatment as well, um to be able to help people kind of in an individual way, right? As to what that person specifically needs and getting down to the root of each individual's needs. And I think that's important because I think what has happened is we went all the way one side, and you're not saying let's now go all the way to the other side. You're saying let's meet in the middle. We need to meet in the middle so we can best serve our patients, so we can best serve people, which is essentially what doctors signed up to do, right?
Exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head.
um, but I want to take a little bit of a different, more specific direction to what you do, because you mentioned that you focus on something that's very interesting that I've not heard a lot of. So I want to put this out there for our audience. So you focus on functional medicine, and you focus specifically on nutrition and like hormones. Talk to me about that. I don't even know what questions to ask. So give us a little bit of education on what all that looks like and how it can help.
Okay. So there are certain conditions that I see all the time in my practice that I didn't realize until I studied functional medicine that are related to hormone imbalances. For example, thyroid, someone that has a thyroid problem has a 30% chance of developing frozen shoulder, which is something that chiropractors treat. And it's not caused by the musculoskeletal condition and injury or anything. It's caused by the thyroid. So as a chiropractor, I would treat these shoulders and nothing was getting better because I didn't know anything about the thyroid. So that's just one example. And so the thyroid, or sorry, all of the hormone imbalances can cause pain, pelvic pain, shoulder pain. They can cause headaches. If you get those headaches that occur once a month, those are hormonal, right? And to make that connection is like, whoa, once I made that connection, I'm like, there's a whole new world out here. And it was really exciting. So yeah, balancing hormones can decrease pain, and it can decrease the frequency and severity of flare-ups from autoimmune conditions. It can improve energy. You get better sleep. And so there's a whole host of things that hormone balancing can also do, in addition to, the neuropathies that I see and the frozen shoulder and the low back pain, which all can have a hormonal correlation. And so why are these hormones out of balance in the first place? Again, always going back to the root cause. Well, for the thyroid, for example, you need iodine, selenium, tyrosine, vitamin D in order to make and regulate thyroid hormone, for example. And so, if you're not eating the right foods that are giving you those nutrients, your body just can't make it or they can't regulate it because you're not eating right. It does the best that it can. Our bodies are so incredible at adapting and making things work. But if we're not eating right and if we're not, giving the body what it needs to do what it does, we're going to fail. And that's where the nutrition steps in.
So I'm curious to know because, so let's say you are someone who has an okay diet, an okay exercise regimen, and you're not great, but you're not terrible. Would you recommend some sort of hormone treatments or therapy? And what would be the youngest age you would see that? Like,
Mm.
I have really young children, so they're 3 and 6, so definitely not for them. But like teenagers in your 20s, like if you want to stay ahead of it, if you're really committed to being as healthy as possible, when would you start that?
My philosophy is let's start it as soon as possible. Now, hormones in children are going to be very, very different from hormones in adults as we go through the life stages. I primarily work with women in their 40s and 50s, but as soon as puberty starts, that might be a good place to start. That's a really good question. I haven't really thought about that, to be honest with you. But how young? That's a really good question. But I'm going to tell you what: the diet, the nutrition, and the healthy lifestyle can start as soon as they can walk.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great point because I think that, with the hormones, to be honest, just from my perspective, and I am a mother of two, so just from a middle class American, mother, I can tell you that I feel like there's not enough information and not enough knowledge for us to know what to look for and when to start becoming aware of when there may be a problem that may be at the root based on hormones. And I love your answer that, as soon as puberty starts, because that is when we start to see things. And as mothers, that is when we start to pay attention to those things. Um, but also, the most important thing that you said is that nutrition can start as soon as they start walking, right? Like nutrition and physical health and well being can start as soon as they're born or start walking. And I think that we miss the importance of that because we live in a culture, in my opinion, that tries to just mask any pain, anything that is uncomfortable we try to mask. And so we run to the Advil, we run to the Tylenol, we run to anything that puts a mask instead of feeling it out and understanding what the root cause of it is. So I really love what you have shared with us today. Um, there are a lot of controversies with the work that you do. I know that. I couldn't tell you all of the specifics of what you do, but I do know um from being in the field that I work in the legal field related to all of the medical related to that, chiropractors are it's like we do or we don't want them. We're not sure. It depends on the case, right? And then when we talk about functional medicine, we know, as we have already talked about, that it's not something that's widely known, widely spread. It's kind of just coming up in the common, common knowledge, I'll say. What do you say for, practitioners in your community? What do you think can be done from your perspective to give more transparency regarding the differing opinions among practitioners themselves? Because I think that's an issue that kind of bottles it up and kind of keeps it from coming onto the mainstream.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and there's always going to be disagreements in approaches, even among medical professionals, among chiropractors, and especially if there's both together. But again, I think the communication is the biggest key to resolving these issues. I'm not going to say that one way's right or one way's wrong because it's such an individual case. but the communication and the cooperation, I think, is really, really key. And yeah, we can have disagreements, but let's talk about why. Why are we disagreeing? Again, getting back to the underlying cause of the disagreements. You know what I'm saying? Always going back to the underlying cause, get to the root. Why are we having this disagreement in the first place? Maybe it's a difference in training, maybe it's a difference in philosophy, but at least let's try to work together for the best outcome um, of our patient and put the patient at the center rather than our disagreements. And I think if we do that, we'll go a long way.
You have such a great outlook on this. And we have to unfortunately wrap up, but I want to thank you for being with us today. So, last question is, what would you say is a key takeaway or a piece of advice that you would like our listeners to remember about functional medicine and their health journey?
Um, I think a huge part of our health that we can control, we can't control genetics, we can't control our environment necessarily, but what we can control is what we put into our bodies. And so that's the main key, because what we put into our bodies has a huge effect on our future. And so if we're putting good things into our bodies, fresh fruits and vegetables, good clean water, and we're not putting in things that are bad like cigarette smoke or mold toxins, if we can handle it, the sugary starchy foods that are that want to pickle our organs, if we avoid some of those, if we're properly hydrated, if we're getting proper exercise and proper sleep, that is going to be give us the biggest advantage no matter what our genetics are going to dictate. If we take what we can control and do the best that we can with what we can control, we're going to have the best life that we can. And that's what it's all about.
I love that. I think that's perfect because we do have to focus on what we can control, because that's where we make change happen. That's where magic happens. And, that's where we get to create the path that we walk. And that's what we do on this podcast. We celebrate the people who create their own paths, the people who go ahead and take what they feel is best for them, embrace that, and create a whole new road that maybe no one else has walked before in order to create the best life for themselves. So I want to thank our listeners. I want to thank Dr. Bradley for being here with us today. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us and our guests.
Thank you for having me. This has been a great conversation. I can't believe the time's already up.
Yes, yes, likewise. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And until next time.